Greetings, students of the Force, to another video. In the past, we have talked about how Obi Wan considered Darth Vader far more powerful than Anakin Skywalker was on Mustafar, and his thoughts following their ultimate duel on the Death Star, as one of the only individuals that dueled both Anakin as well as Lord Vader. Well, since then, the Obi Wan Kenobi series show has been released, giving us 2 more duels between the titular master and apprentice. With the information that has been provided to us, we wanted to return to this topic and truly explore Vader's evolution of his power from Obi-Wan's perspective, as he is the only Jedi who has truly experienced Vader's power firsthand at every stage of his life, and his entire lifespan within the dark side of the Force itself. So, without further ado, let us begin. First though, according to our analytics, a lot of you that watch the channel haven't actually subscribed yet, so if you've been enjoying the daily Star Wars lore, force crush that subscribe button. To begin though, let's start with a brief recap. Let's revisit what Obi-Wan had said regarding Darth Vader after their final duel on the Death Star. This was his direct quote: "The Sith Lord was now more experienced and powerful than before. This duel was very different from the last. I was older and weaker, while Vader was even stronger and fueled by hatred and a thirst for revenge." This small passage though was of course written at a time before the release of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, but I still think it holds true, as we saw Vader was still very intense and fiery during their confrontations in the show the 2 times that they met on the battlefield. At the end of the penultimate duel, Vader was left heavily damaged and screaming out into the night for Obi-Wan. Meanwhile, emotionally, Obi-Wan had finally moved on from Vader, as represented by calling him Darth, choosing to call him Darth instead of Obi-Wan. This signified him finally moving on from the path of Anakin and his failure with the young Skywalker, and it truly exemplifies Obi-Wan's views towards his old brother. He has become so far removed from him as he believes that Anakin is now truly dead, and this is the moment where he finds out. That is why here, he doesn't even dignify him with calling him Vader, he simply calls him Darth. He refers to Anakin by the title that so many Sith Lords in the past have held, because the title of Darth is nothing but pure darkness and corruption, and this is what it truly represents at its core. This moment best foreshadows his opinions that Vader is more machine than man, twisted and consumed by the dark side. Believe it or not though, this does relate also to Vader's power levels and his mental state when it comes to the dark side itself. So let's break it down from the very beginning and analyze what Obi-Wan thought of Anakin all the way to his final confrontation with Lord Vader. When Obi-Wan fought Anakin on Mustafar, he was first interacting with the intense fiery side of Anakin. The dark side was fresh and strong within the young boy, and his anger was at an all-time peak. This is best represented by the volcanic activity of Mustafar, which perfectly puts into context Anakin's current emotional state. He was explosive, unruly, and gorging himself on all of his newfound power. This comes out in his lightsaber technique against Obi-Wan, which was just as offensive as it has always been, using his form Gem So, Form 5. However, this time, it seemed as if he was fighting even more harshly than he normally would. Even at the Jedi Temple, he didn't put as much fury into his strikes as he was putting against Obi-Wan, his master. Of course, at the time, he was enraged, as he believed that Obi-Wan had turned Padme, his one love, against him. His use of the Force, as well as his lightsaber style, were in a constant state of momentum and forward motion as he battered out his anger against Obi-Wan. However, his master was actually within his own element as well. With Obi-Wan being a master of Surisu, he didn't mind being on the back pedal for most of the duel, and focusing on his defenses form suited him just fine. Obi-Wan knew Anakin very well from all of their training and battles in the past, but the same though could also be said for Anakin. Their skills canceled each other out, and even Anakin's newfound powers didn't save him from his own arrogance. After the burning, Anakin fully came into his own as the new Dark Lord of the Sith. He had to entirely adjust every facet of his life and his fighting style to accommodate for his newfound limitations gifted by his master. When Obi-Wan meets him again 10 years later, Obi-Wan is severely out of practice and completely out of step with the Force, whereas Vader has been working and training a great deal of time specifically to kill his former master. The one-sided beatdown Obi-Wan received on Mapuzo showed us just how much Vader had still harbored hatred and fury for his master from all of those years back, harboring and waiting to burst. Their climactic duel though saw Vader being put on the back foot as Obi-Wan switched forms and styles and became aggressive once his full power ultimately returned. But as the years went by, and Vader slowly let go of his need for vengeance against Obi Wan and his old master, his explosive fury simmered down to an icy cold bitterness, and his powers in the Force and lightsaber style showed the same result. No longer did Vader use an overwhelming onslaught of power strikes, but he would use a far more calculated method of attack. He wasn't a sledgehammer anymore, but a precise and sharp scalpel. He knew when exactly to strike, and would often allow himself to go on the defense and let his enemy vent on him, lulling them into a false notion that they were gaining the upper hand, all while Vader was simply tiring them out and waiting for the perfect opportune moment to strike, and strike true. Vader was now cold and calculated. He was swift and elegant, ready to take someone down in the most efficient and measured way possible. And it was this that Obi-Wan recognized of his former pupil during their final duel on the Death Star. He thought that perhaps he could still at least defeat or disarm Vader so that Luke could escape. Yet he quickly realized that Vader had grown far too powerful in an unexpected way. He had become experienced in the dark side and was not given into emotion, but using the dark side as his own tool, no longer being domineered by it. He had mastered the ways of Dun Mok and similar dark side abilities that gave him subtle but important edges against his master in combat. Gone was the explosive Mustafarian brute strength Anakin that Kenobi had faced down 3 times before, but now, surrounded by the cold steel and pale lights of the Death Star, Obi-Wan was fighting a cold and a calculated machine. A machine of war. The fact that Vader had been cut down far below his original potential had now become all but irrelevant. He had mastered the dark side not by his inherent talent, but by skill and his refinement alone. You see, this specific view of the dark side was what made Vader so separate from the Sith Lords of the past, and even his own younger self. We talked about how many people of the ancient Sith days had terrifying visions of Lord Vader, and perhaps this is why. Sith Lords of the past focused entirely on their rage and their passion, using these to fuel their power and their blade in combat, and ensuring that they could overpower their opponent on pure emotion and darkness alone. However, Lord Vader was different. He drew almost exclusively from pain. Pain of his body and his suit. Pain from his loss of life and love. And pain for everything that he had lost as Anakin. Drawing from this suffering created a very different kind of control over the dark side. A new control. Luke Skywalker once stated that he believed that Jedi would always be far superior lightsaber duelists than any Sith were, simply due to the fact that they drew upon concentration, which allowed them to stay even in combat and remember their technique over someone who gave into their emotional state and leapt in like a rabid animal. Vader and Dooku both recognized this though, and used the Jedi way of combat. But Vader took it a step further by perfectly merging the dark side and the more measured form of Jedi combat into one. His coldness and bitterness provided the perfect platform from which to bring great strength and ruthless precision when in combat. So this is why Ben Kenobi said that Vader was far stronger than Anakin had ever been. But now, my friends, we would love to hear what you think. Does this make sense to you, or do you have your own interpretation and theory? Be sure to let us know in the comments down below. May the Force be with you, and we will hopefully see you in the next video.